Hi guys, Adam here as per usual. Thanks again for checking out the video and welcome to another FAQ Friday. This week I wanted to talk about something that's been kind of burning in my mind the last 6 months or so, and that is the rack coming back? Oh yeah, rhyming. Is the rack coming back? There's been sort of a trend over the last, I would say 10 years or so, but especially over the last 5 or 6 years or so, kind of in the time that I've been really interested in gear in the last 6 years or so. There's been a trend of people downsizing, people kind of going from the massive racks of the 80s where it was not uncommon at all to have 2 or 3 12 to 16U rack units. So you're talking like sort of 30, 40 pieces of equipment in a rack just to get absolutely awesome 80s and 90s tones. Then kind of the end of the 90s, the beginning of the noughties, that kind of fizzled out a bit. And in the last sort of 6 to 10 years especially, I've noticed guys going from having massive racks down to kind of old school kind of guitar into amp or guitar and pedal board into amp. Pedal boards are starting to get more and more complex, but even so, the majority of people who get a complex pedal board and then will go, right, kind of wasting my time a bit here, and they'll strip back to maybe up to 8 sort of essential pedals if you like, a couple of guitars, 1, 2 amps and a cab, and that's it, done. But I've also seen a trend in the last sort of year or two of racks starting to come back a little more. Now I don't know if it's because I've got more interested in rack units and I am putting together my first ever sort of proper rack. So as the story goes, I used to have a rack that had sort of 2 or 3 pieces in it that accompanied my pedal board. But this time I'm starting to put together a bigger rack. I'm going to go for maybe 6U, and I'm going to run a hybrid setup. So that means I'm going to have a pedal board and I'm going to have a rack. But instead of having a large pedal board or a large rack, I'm going to have sort of a small pedal board and a small rack. So I'm going to have drive, compression, wah pedals, volume pedals, that kind of thing on the board, on the floor in front of me. And I'm going to have the more fixed effects in a rack. So we're talking your reverbs, delays and some modulation that I can get in there, all rack mounted. And I've noticed a lot of people are starting to do this again. They're starting to run kind of hybrid setups. So they've gone from massive racks down to simple small pedal boards, and now they're starting to just expand out a little bit again. Yeah, so what's your take on it? What do you think's better? Do you prefer an all rack setup, an all pedal setup, or a hybrid setup? For me at the moment, I'm going towards the hybrid setup. I'm going to be running an amp head, a cab, a 2x12 cab, a small rack and a small pedal board. I'm toying with the idea of a wet dry wet setup, which is something we'll get into in another video. Kind of in a band with 2 or 3 guitarists playing at any one time. Wet dry wet's going to completely get lost. It's going to be too much. But if I was the only guitarist, so when I was in Glorious, if I had the kind of knowledge and a little bit of spare cash that I had now, I'd be considering putting together a wet dry wet rig. I think racks coming back a little bit. You're starting to see more rack units popping up on eBay, more people interested in them, more people talking about running rack setups, or at least even just running sort of 2 or 3 units in a rack. What's your thoughts? What's your preference? Do you prefer pedals? Do you prefer a rack? And do you think, like me, that the rack is coming back? As ever, thanks for watching guys, and see you next Friday for another FAQ Friday.